Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet Talking Tactics with my good friend Dharnish here. And we're back again. And in unusual circumstances and in what feels like once again the manager sacking waiting room that we've been in before. And we were sitting here thinking about doing this and kind of delaying a little bit to see was there a point? Is there a point in discussing? Is there a point in breaking down what has been going wrong under Eric Ten Hag and the tactics and all of that, and what solutions there might be? Because will we see another game with Eric Ten Hag in charge? And right now, I'll explain a bit more later on or towards the end of the video. We probably don't need a full hour to break it down this time, given we're doing these a little more often now. But to break down what's going wrong. But at the end, I want to explain maybe a little bit where things stand and why at the moment I definitely lean towards following today's executive summit as we're recording this. Ten Hag getting just a bit more time. Even if a change is probably in the offing, especially if things continue at all similarly to how they are now. And quite honestly, I think a change is probably in the offing in the long term period at this point in time, but those are two different questions. So, how are we, Dharnish? How have you been?
Oh, well, I mean, basically the same, but it's not that intro is gonna have people going, "Where? What the?" I can hear a bunch of people across England right now just going, "Wait, what the hell? One more time?" But that's certainly one way to bring it in. I'm okay. Um, a point against Villa is a point against Villa at the end of the day. A point against Porto is a point against Porto at the end of the day. It just feels like we're watching the same things. There, with each game, there's more and more question marks. I feel the answers that he's giving are kind of predictable in the sense that now I have this theory that we can almost tell what he's going to do each game. Um, and normally he does what we think he's going to do. The frustrating thing is there the players are still behind him. The players are still clearly following his tactical instructions because it's a big change I saw from Villa to Tottenham. It was a big change. I think everybody saw it.
Yeah.
So it's like saying, okay, so you can get the players to play in a certain way where you need things to be more compact. Why can you not do that when the opposition and the game wants you to? Or why can you not
Mm.
make a mix of those things? Um, and then we've had Brighton, Fulham, Brighton, let's say Southampton, Liverpool, um, help me out here, Villa. Am I missing
Crystal
anybody?
Palace.
Crystal
Crystal Palace.
Palace. That's
Yeah.
it now. 6 games. We have seven?
Seven. So yeah, Tottenham. Yeah, Tottenham.
Tottenham, yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like during those games, the two big alarming games of Tottenham and Liverpool, the things that Man United do on the pitch and the way he sets the team up in certain games, he can take those little aspects and combine it with the way that the team was set up against Liverpool and Tottenham, but he doesn't choose to, if that makes sense. So because each good thing that I've seen at the beginning of this I know it's a wretched season, but there's still certain little aspects that work. He doesn't bother doing them in games where it's needed. He switches too much. He's the man of change. He's a man of too much change. It works. It worked fantastically in the first season. He was the tweak master in the first season.
Mm.
Oh, something's going wrong. Okay, I'll just do this. I'll change it.
Right.
Oh, I think we need X in this game. There's 20 minutes left, and I'm out of options. I'll bring McTominay on up front for 10 more minutes. Those little changes were turning to gold. Everything he touched was changing to gold. It just feels as though since that he makes too many changes and makes the changes so frequently according to the game, according to the situation, according to the stadium. According to the stadium, I could have told anybody that he was going to press Liverpool and Tottenham at home. I could have told anybody that there was going to be gaps in the middle because he only presses when at home. Like he only
Mm,
presses at home. You could do that against mid-table teams. You do it against Fulham. You know, there was still gaps against Fulham, but it tends to work because Fulham have Calvin Bassey at the back. It's not going to work against Liverpool because
yes.
number one, Liverpool still one of the best pressers and have been for the last 5 or 6 years, and they're going to press you in possession, and that's how we conceded lots of chances and lots of goals. And it's the same with Tottenham. Um, I'm not sure. Did we go over the Tottenham game?
No, we didn't. I don't think because we did it just before that, and yeah, ahead of Tottenham, and it was yeah, that was a rough one, wasn't it?
That was a rough one, but that's another situation where I don't want to come off and sound like I'm just bashing the club for anything. I want to give actual points that I feel are relevant. Tottenham this season have struggled because they've struggled against Arsenal and they've struggled against Newcastle in games, and then they've struggled in other games against Leicester as well. For the first half, what they've done is they will relentlessly attack, almost more so than any other team in the league. By the way, like
Yep.
no other team attacks as relentlessly as Tottenham do. But what tends to happen is they don't really finish their dinner. They'll maybe score one. Um, they'll have lots of corners. They'll have lots of shots and lots of chances. When that doesn't happen, when they don't get the second goal, you can then counter. But take a look at the way Arsenal set up against them. Arsenal, whether we like it or not, probably top three teams in Europe, probably top five, definitely top two best teams in the league, especially out of possession. Look at the way Arteta set up against them.
Mm-hmm.
Mid
Yep.
block, compact the center, force them wide, and then go for transitions. Most of that
Right.
game, most of that game was Arsenal comfortably on the edge of their penalty area. There is nothing wrong with doing that. There is nothing wrong with doing that. The blueprint is in front of you in terms of how to give Tottenham problems, right? Why are
Yep.
you opening up? Why are you transforming the game into um, an open one where the forward line was pressing? The Tottenham players just kept dragging United players everywhere, everywhere. It was
Yep.
Kulusevski was dropping in, and sometimes Minu would go pick up Kulusevski, and as this happened, Solanke would go up front, so they kept rotating. Um, they kept switching players. They would drop in wide sometimes, and that would mean the forward line would go and press wide, opening up a gap on the other side. And as this happened, Tottenham could easily switch it. They're good under pressure, Tottenham. So why are
Yep.
you transforming the game into Tottenham struggle in terms of creating space when they're mid-blocked? That you find this
Mm-hmm.
in every Tottenham game. There's two players at the back, Romero and Van der Ven, and everybody else is pushed up because that's how
Yes.
attack-minded they are. The
Yep.
point is, you want to make sure that you are creating the game situations where you see that, where you see two
Yeah.
defenders at the back and everybody else pushed up, and then you can compact them and counter. What United strangely did was press them in attack, which meant that the game was open. You're giving Tottenham the answer of Tottenham's problem is we don't know how to find space when we're mid blocked. Man United literally gave him the answer, and it's because again they're at home. He feels like they need to press. He feels like he needs to change the game situation again. Um, and then we get this game against Villa where again, the way they played against Villa was the way they should have played against Tottenham,
Correct. Mm-hmm.
right? Rashford and Garnacho, you could easily see within the first 5 minutes, nobody pressed. Garnacho
Yep.
and Rashford tucking in because Villa have, I think, Ramsey and McGinn. Now, Villa are very, very good at having wingers on paper. So it will say 4-2-3-1 on paper. McGinn and maybe Ramsey are the wingers. What they'll do is they'll drop in the middle into the half spaces, so it drags the defender with them. Within the first 5 or 6 minutes, I could tell straight away Rashford and Garnacho were tucking in to prevent this from happening. And I threw my hands up in the air because I was like, dude, why did you not do this against Tottenham? It doesn't make any sense. Again, game mode, switching away from home, away to a big team. They've just beaten Bayern Munich. He couldn't lose that game because the pressure
Mm.
was higher than it's ever been.
Yeah, and I think that it's where it's tricky and it's concerning is that that I've said this before, and I know that people don't like it, I said it after Palace, and I understand why people didn't like it, but I still see a lot of evidence of this, and I think people are growing into thinking this way with me, and sometimes it's hard to accept it because you look at like a manager and you think, of course, they have more experience than you or I will have in a lifetime, right? They should know better. They should totally know better. I strongly get the idea that it has very little to do with planning for the opposition and everything
Wow.
to do with planning with pre-planned concepts, right? So you take the Aston Villa game, right? Um, you essentially had two teams kind of doing the same thing, because I think both teams were really kind of poor in that game, right? They were
Mm,
very, very slow in the build-up, very slow and in the pressures, very slow to kind of do anything. I think what you said was the case. We set up like that against Aston Villa because we couldn't lose because of the pressure on him. Nothing to do with Aston Villa. I don't think it had anything to do with them. Now, I'm not saying when you say like the stadium and the thing and this and that, I'm not disputing that either. But it had very little to do with them, right? Because but here's what's
mm,
really funny, okay, about this. I like to look at this season. I've done a big personally, like I had a big focus on Diogo Dalot and how he's been utilized in the game to game situations, right? Because against Tottenham and against Porto, we did once again this thing of tucking Diogo Dalot in, and both of them went really, really hard at the spaces behind Diogo
mm,
Dalot against
yeah.
Lisandro Martinez. And the same on the other side too, right? When the ball would go the other way and Mazraoui would tuck in, right? Because this is a possession thing, right? If I'm not mistaken. If it's on the left, it just happens to be on the left a bit more. So we notice it with Dalot that he tucks in a lot and it leaves a center back there in Lisandro Martinez. There was on the right, when Mazraoui would tuck in, you get the same thing. How many times did Timo Werner get in on Matthias de Ligt in that game? 3, 4
Yeah.
times. The reason it was less noted is because Timo Werner can't finish, and his final ball is absolutely horrendous. And
Yeah.
Onana made 2 or 3 saves one-on-one, right?
Two, three
And
big
has
saves.
actually saved us from massive embarrassment in both Tottenham and Porto. And in both instances, you could see this. It's kind of what Arne Slot said: is you could catch the fullbacks up high and then get in behind them, and it's that easy, right? And we know, like Lisandro, not a great channel defender. You get Lisandro running backwards, and he's in serious trouble because he's not very fast and he's not very big, and he just doesn't have that. That's not his skill set. De Ligt is the same thing in a lot of ways, and now he's getting a lot of criticism now after in the start of the year getting a lot of praise. And I think that the approach is sort of like it had nothing to do with it because both Porto and Tottenham set up to play really fast wingers, right? And Brennan
Yeah.
Johnson and Werner to stay a little bit wider and attack those spaces. And Porto, you could tell from minute one, attacked the space with Lisandro Martinez. They doubled up on there in like their first 2 possessions to just run at that side and get in there and attack that space. And then they found it on the other side later in the game that Onana stopped. But then against Aston Villa, we kept Dalot wide. And it is, I think it's just a little bit ironic because the way you've described the wingers for Aston Villa, I think is true,
Yeah.
is that you'd almost have a slightly better matchup keeping Dalot narrow in that case than having him wide. I'm not saying it didn't work, but the thing in general here, right, is that we are defensively way better when we do not expose Lisandro Martinez and we keep a fullback actually like in position in these spaces
Yeah.
out wide. We just it's better, right? And
When United want to be compact,
mhm,
it's better. It's better. When they want to be and when he plays it
yeah,
in that manner, they're a more compact team. Now, what Tottenham and Porto did, they kept using United's press against them. So,
yep,
like I said, they pull it wide, play it down the touchline, and then switch it. The
Yes.
problem with that is, and you kept seeing this against Tottenham and Porto, there'd be like 6 players on one side, or 4 players on one side and 2 scampering back. You'd see Bruno and like Xerxes scampering back, or Bruno and Hoyland scampering back. That's
Mm,
because they were pressing up the top of the pitch. Um,
yep.
so like when for instance Xerxes would go to press Romero, Fernandez would press the keeper, and then instead of the defender, Garnacho has to go across then and close down Van der Ven instead of the fullback. There was always a +1 in midfield, because then Mino was
Yeah.
tracking 2 players. So like
Yes.
either side of him, he had a player. And Spurs, then they always had a +1. Then you get into the fact that he's also told the fullbacks to push up in the press, but it's a bad press. So
Hmm.
Mazraoui would push up, they would knock it down the line to Udogi, he would turn him and go. The point being that the opposition always has a +1 in the middle of the pitch. If they don't have a +1 in the middle of the pitch, they will wait for this press that United do, and it's not a very good press, and then it's easy
Mm,
to play through them.
yep.
When United are compact, at the very least, without the ball, they're compacting the middle and they're compacting the center.
Yep.
For a team that has struggled as United has had for the last 2 seasons, I'm surprised he hasn't used it more. Obviously, it's a little bit of a negative way for me to say that, but Sir Alex Ferguson used to do that always. Away in the
Mm,
Champions League, you knew what you were getting. 0-0, we'll get out of there, no problem. Bring him at home, and that is fine to do that. I'm surprised that I haven't seen it more from Ten Hag.
yeah. Well, I think, of course, the issue is that, when you take like the Sir Alex Ferguson teams, right? They were good at going for the win, and they would beat up
When they
small
needed to,
teams in
yeah.
the league, right? You know
Maybe
what I mean? Like when I'm,
maybe in the last
yeah,
5 or 10 minutes. But again, it's not.
yeah.
I didn't have much of a problem with how they set up against Villa. Bruno hit the bar. Rashford could have scored, but that was the situation that he wanted from that game. He wanted to
Mm-hmm.
get the game to
Yeah.
that level of it's no
Correct.
nil. We were lucky that Villa. We played midweek as well, by the way. We played on
Yeah.
Thursday. It's not. It
Yeah.
wasn't that many days difference. Villa played midweek as well.
Yeah.
Having a game like that, getting the game into that situation where it's like, okay, one bit of quality might win us the game. Nothing
Yep.
wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I fear because I feel like last season I came to the conclusion that okay, all of what he's doing is a response to the injuries, regardless of the response being bad each time, whether it was hoofball, um, whether it was chaos ball, whether it was scrap the principles before the winter. I thought all of that was going to be better when we had players fit. And he said this in the press conferences as well. He said, "Look, I told you when I got players back, we were a better team." Kind of like we beat Wolves 4-3, but there
Yeah.
was still the gaps in midfield. So I thought, okay,
Well, he
maybe you
did
can go
say
in
in
the summer and
April,
figure it out.
if we're fit, we're a top 4 team, and now we're fit with
Yes,
more players, and we're in 14th, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Shockingly, what is it? How many points clear of relegation?
5, right, at the moment?
That
Is it
scares
that
me. Honestly,
much? Is it that
honestly,
much? How much is
it does scare me.
it? No, yeah, we are 5 5
I know
points
it's
of
really early,
relegation
but
and 6 points off top 4, but also 10 points already off the top of the league after 7 games,
you
And it is
shouldn't
our
even.
worst start ever, so
Yeah,
yeah.
he made his
Beat his last year's record. Yeah.
he beat his own worst start.
And my point on it is like what I was getting at on that point is like if you're a good team and you figured out how to play how you want to play to go win games. Like if you know how to go to the bottom 10 teams and win a game, then it's okay to have your backup plan of being compact and grinding some games out for points, right? It's okay. I think the problem is our plan A, our setup to go and win games doesn't work. We're not winning
Mm,
games. And it's been really bad, right? It's been quite poor. The way that we go about winning games is really quite poor. And essentially, we struggled against all but the absolute worst teams in the league right now. I mean, Crystal Palace, like we said, that first half was good, but they've been really bad this year, right? They've been
yeah,
really, really quite poor this year. And even then, it faded pretty quickly. Against Southampton, we could have been down a goal or 2 in the first
yeah.
30 minutes quite
Onana
easily, but then
saved
we
the
turned it
penalty.
around. Yeah. And that momentum shift got us in control, right? Where we got up 2 goals in 7 minutes after the penalty, like really fast, like bang, bang. And then we were in control and it was easy. And the concern is that, like, if the job is to, especially as a third year, is to build a consistent, controlling way of playing, we can't really build on the Aston Villa result, right? Like that's a plan you can do when you need a point, when you need a game, when you need a result. It's not your baseline, like, this is how we're going to play every game moving forward, to control, to attack, to score, to build, this, what have you, game model, this style of play, not pressing, settling in deep is not the way, that we're going to build. And so it's like you have these two different problems at the moment. The results have been so bad that he essentially had to do it for himself. And that's why I say I think it's a little bit of an accident, because to me, it was purely a response to the fact that we're not winning any points and we keep getting embarrassed, right? And defensively, it's been so open. But it's concerning, because again, why didn't we do it up 2-0 to Porto? Why didn't we do it? Why didn't we go compact in that moment in time? And it's because the game against Porto is how we wanted to play football. The game against Tottenham is how he wants to play football, and it's just not working. And it's like that's the issue, I think, underlying it. It's just not working.
But it's not working. But there is piles of evidence for it to not work. We had a whole season of it last season. So I don't really. Let's try and get into let's try and get into his head. And let's try and look at it from, obviously this guy knows more about football than us. His Ajax team was fantastic, absolutely brilliant. It spawned off I don't know how many talents that are across European football now. But what I think he's trying to do with this is obviously create more chances for his attack because it's fast. The problem that he hasn't contended with is, and maybe this is why Johnny Evans and Maguire came back in, it still leaves loads of gaps in the middle. But other teams, like, it's not always the easiest to score goals, right? We love XG, but the amount that teams shoot, that's going to be more than they score.
Yeah, of course, always. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You're always going to miss chances. It's just
right.
A fact.
Like it's like, okay, have 10 shots if you want, because I know you're going to miss 6 to 7. It's a very bizarre way to look at things. So I'm not really. What do you think is the explanation?
It's hard to logic it, because no matter how smart somebody is, right, and how intelligent they are, sometimes you can get lost in, right? Like people can get lost where it's hard to step back and be objective from a situation when you're in it, when there's been so much turbulence, so much chaos, so many problems, so many things that you've been dealing with. And so in a large respect, I feel that Ten Hag is a victim, as well as we know, of the circumstance of joining the club and everything that happened the first 2 seasons. The problem is, I don't know that he has any way out of it. And so you end up in a situation where you go like problem, and then you try to solve it, and you have a new problem, and you try to solve it, and you have a new problem, and you try to solve it. And you're not stepping back and saying, what am I actually trying to do anymore? And you lose sight of that. And I'll give you like my example on that, right? You take the first season. We kind of know what happened in the first season. We set up a certain way to play in preseason. Worked good in preseason. It was like this single pivot and the 2 8s, and we've kind of come back to that now, funnily enough. After 2.5, after 2
2
years.
pivots and 2 8s. Yeah.
But we didn't start the season that way. And we didn't play that way in preseason, and we didn't sign the players to play that way this summer, right? If you look at it, they signed, for example, Manuel Ugarte as a partner to Kobbie Mainoo to build a little bit more of like that deeper destroyer, physical player, conveyor belt type of Kobbie Mainoo player who can get up and down and move it around, but is still energetic and your creative 10. So it's not a flat 3. It's not quite a 2, but it is, right? And to do it that way. and to have a false nine and kind of make that box midfield type of thing that he's done at Ajax before. But that box midfield that he did, like he's had a few iterations, but he did do a box midfield at one point there, where the 9 and the 9.5 and the 10 are are getting beyond each other all the time. But it was with two midfielders behind them, not the fullback, and the fullbacks were staying high and wide because then your wingers are getting narrow. And it's when we first came into the Premier League, when he first started that summer, he set up with almost what we're doing now. And we got absolutely destroyed, right, by Brentford and Brighton in those first two games. I mean, completely annihilated. They saw exactly what we were doing, and they attacked it ruthlessly. And they completely beat us. And so he said, all right, I've got to pivot. And then we signed Casemiro and we signed Antony. And we switched to, again, as you've said, and we've talked about before, we know this mid block, not quite a deep block, though it was pretty deep at times because we didn't press. So naturally you get pushed back. And
compact the middle and hit teams on the counter. Or
which
keep
worked.
The ball 3-1-6 against the bottom line teams.
Yep.
Definitely worked.
And it worked in a large part, of course, slightly due to the factor of Marcus Rashford going a bit nuclear that season. If that doesn't happen,
if you're winning, all of a sudden everything comes together, and all of a sudden, obviously, we had two players that were really overperforming. Casemiro and Rashford were really overperforming. Yes. Casemiro probably compensated for a lot of space in midfield, and Rashford probably took care of most of the goals in attack.
Yep. And then after the League Cup, it stopped. Even in that season, right? Our form took a huge nosedive. The performances were terrible. And we really limped into the end of that season from a performance perspective, because teams, I think, started to figure it out in a similar way that they did in the past. Because we've been there before, attacking in transition under Solskjaer and such. We've been there before to a degree. And I think his was a bit more creative, a bit more problem solving. But and then last year, like you said, you have all the injuries, yada, yada. But here's what throws me, Dharnish, and this is what doesn't make any sense to me. I think each season we have seen in the preseason the way that Ten Hag wants to play. We saw it in the first season. We started the two games exactly how we played in preseason. The second season, we started in preseason with Casemiro and Kobbie Mainoo. And then Kobbie got this serious injury in preseason. And we said, shit, we don't know what to do with that, right? But we didn't go back to the Casemiro-Eriksen thing of the first season all year, really. Eriksen had a little bit of injury stuff too, but he was healthy for a while and he didn't even play. There was all these problem solvings, but we were intending, even last preseason, to play like that Casemiro-Kobbie Mainoo. Now, the Ugarte-Mainoo tandem is the same thing. In a lot of ways, it's the same thing. I'm not saying Casemiro and Ugarte are identical, but it's the same concept of what you're trying to do. And in preseason, we did that. Harry Amas played most of the preseason, and as a fullback, I don't think he ever inverted into the midfield. He was wide. He was staying really wide, doing a lot of combinations with Marcus Rashford down that left side. And I think it was quite a positive. We started the year, and I think, again, what happened was the Liverpool result shook Ten Hag a lot. We got battered at home against Liverpool. And then we changed again, right? We changed again. And we switched to something else. And we said, all right, now we're going to, because that happened. And then against Southampton, he started with Eriksen and we were getting battered. Dalot was getting overrun. And he started to tuck him in to get behind Eriksen because, and then it's just been like, we've got to play Christian Eriksen every single game since then because he was creating chances. And
that's
that
another thing that
problem created,
I still haven't really understood.
Like everything else. That's how I see it. I don't see a world where you can play Christian Eriksen and press. If he's alone, maybe, and you had two hard workers behind him, but then you also have to start Bruno Fernandes every game.
I also don't see a world where we can play Eriksen and manage these gaps. I think I tweeted about it as well, but it wasn't. in the second half against Villa, United dropped off, and then they kept getting in the spaces in behind. Not in behind necessarily. They had more central space.
Yes. Yeah. There
But
was
I was like,
gaps.
it's Ericsson who was running back. I was like, dude, we signed somebody else, or we said we recognized this problem in the first season by saying, bro, you are exhausted. We cannot play you every 90 minutes. And
Yes.
now he's gone back to it because he has no other choice.
Mhm.
He signed Ugarte for 50 million in the summer. I guess he's slowly
He's not
bedding
even
him in.
playing.
Yeah, I guess, but I
It
don't
doesn't
know.
make here's the thing, it really doesn't make sense because once again, what are we gonna see during this international break? We're gonna see Ugarte go play for Bielsa at Uruguay.
Oh, really? What,
Yeah,
commit 8
again.
fouls and press like a dog?
Yeah, and say
Just
he's
say he's
not
injured or
physically ready,
something.
like that he's
Just
not
say he's
ready to
injured.
play. You
Uh,
can't. You can't. It's not. It doesn't. And the thing is, like, one could look at the Tottenham game and say he played bad. Okay, who didn't?
hmm.
And then he doesn't see the pitch after that. Lissandro got torn apart. De Ligt
I
got
did.
torn apart. Dallo was awful that game. One
I
of
mean,
his few really
by the way,
bad games. Everyone was
everybody was
terrible.
diabolical. Yeah, it
You,
wasn't
you,
like we can. I've been through
yeah,
the tactical problems against
yes,
Tottenham. We have to preface this by saying there's the intangibles of like
yeah,
bad touch, bad pass, too much on the
yeah,
pass, bad header, bad clearance, bad decision. All
yeah.
like that was on top of what was going on against Tottenham.
Correct. Like they were
The
all bad, right? I wouldn't
They
single a
were all
player out and
bad.
say, "Oh
Like,
yeah, that guy shouldn't play. He was the problem,"
but it
because
adds on
that's not
top
the
of
case.
the, you already
Yeah,
have a bad tactical plan.
yeah,
Sometimes what happens in matches is like the players play well enough to somehow work past the system, so
yes,
it covers up the cracks against Tottenham. Almost everybody was bad, so it was more you got
yeah.
more
It doubled
exposed.
up.
The, the other thing I want to speak about, I felt like the progress that we made against Brighton, against Southampton, to some degree against Palace, was good in the sense that we saw teams in 22-23 in Ten Hag's first season. I think after the Carling Cup win, where we were saying Man United, when they get pressed, particularly in defence, it's a big problem. They don't know how to build out from it. They don't know how to get past it. I particularly remember, like, I think Leeds, for some reason, is in my head. Somerville, I think Wilfred
Mm,
Nonto. They kept pressing everybody in their left Varane because they knew Varane wasn't the best passing out from the back. Against Southampton, Palace, and Brighton this year, I was like, this is, the addition of Mazraoui and Dallo just being a lot better, and Ericsson as an advanced 8, this team was getting better when pressed. Against Palace, they found spaces on the edges of the midfield. Against Southampton, there were some tough tackles on Cobby, and they kept pressing him. But after a while, they were still getting the ball through. Against Brighton, it was the same, working through a press, which is brilliant. Liverpool and Tottenham pressed United, and all we saw was Martinez couldn't get the ball out from the back.
yeah,
That's a big worry. It's a big worry because Martinez under pressure was almost the whole build up in his first season,
correct.
all of it. He was getting through the press and punching balls through the middle, and that's important because, as Guardiola says, it's his job to get the ball from A to B to transport it smoothly from defense into attack. After that, it's the attacker's decisions, and managers can't really handle that. Um, so it was a huge problem that the progress made through pressure was sort of, there was a two-step back element to it because of the Tottenham and the
Hmm.
Liverpool game. Again, it's just better teams that press. Um, I'm not really providing any solutions here. I'm just pointing out a bunch of problems because
Yeah.
there's just been a whole host of problems in these first 7 games.
Don't you think that in general, it would make sense to simplify things a little bit
Yes,
and stick with a
absolutely.
basic structure? Like if we want to press a bit, it doesn't have to be all out, right? Every game, right? But if we want to press, keep the fullbacks high and wide so that they can back up the wingers like everybody else seems to do on earth, right? I mean, we talked about that last year. One of the reasons the
A
press was
lot.
really bad at times is that the
Oh, I
fullbacks
don't
don't
know.
follow it up. But they can't do that when they're tucking in either. They can't follow it up, and and we know that. But wouldn't it make sense to go with 2 hard workers in a midfield behind your creative midfielder, 2 hardworking runners in a midfield, what kind of almost everybody does as well. in front of a back four, keep the fullbacks up, backing up the wingers in the press, and just start with that kind of basic structure to build off of with the players that we have.
If that's what you need, and again, that's kind of what happened against Villa, right?
Mhm.
Rashford,
Mhm.
by the way, out of possession. Rashford isn't the best player. I'm not going to say that, but
Yeah.
even against the Villa game, he was, they doubled up. Arsenal do this a lot. Saka and
Yep.
Martinelli go back with their wingers a lot. They'll double up against the wingers. Garnacho did
Yep.
this. Rashford did this. And there wasn't a frontline press necessarily.
Mhm.
There wasn't. I didn't see Bruno always headless presses. It really annoys me.
Yep.
But I saw that less against Villa.
Yep.
You can do that. You can mid block, and then when an opponent's attack breaks down, then utilize your fast attacks or transitions.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be playing a game where, okay, forward line presses, chaos ball, there's 6 players up the pitch, but hopefully the attack breaks down and then we can break. No. The point should be mid block, keep it compact. Then when the attack goes down for an opponent, that's when you can hit teams with transitions. It makes a
Yep.
ton more sense. And if people are going to disagree with me, go look at what we did against Villa. I'm not saying it was the best game ever. I'm not saying it was something to build on or anything like this. He played for a point. He just about got
Yeah.
there. But it does show what this team can do under tactical instructions when they're told to be a little bit more compact, a bit more
Right.
defensive minded.
They obviously can listen. They can not press when they're told not to press. Dallo can stay wide or invert. It's all instruction based, the positions that they're in and where they're at. One of the things that I'm reminded of in you saying that is Aston Villa away. I think it was away last year, the comeback win around Christmas time. And the first half we were down 2-0 to them, and we came back and won 3-2.
3-3
And
to
one of
nil.
the things I recall us talking about after that game, which you'll note because it was a really similar lineup with Johnny Evans in there and everything, is that in the second half you'll remember Johnny Evans and the whole team pushed way up.
Yeah, all of them.
They and instead of just sitting deep to hit on the break, we pushed up, like
all
up,
the way up. Yeah.
and we got in their face on that, and we actually backed up the line. Like it was a mid
Everybody
block,
did.
but it was a
Everybody
really
did.
high line in that mid block, and we backed everything up on that
I
press.
remember Wan-Bissaka literally following Rodgers into the center circle. Like even if he was dragging him, he was like, "I'm gonna go with you anyway."
Yeah,
And that was
and
because
Evans, he was in their half tackling. He was going for it.
Yeah.
And we backed that up. And what's frustrating is that when we do that, we can. When we really back it up, like I think about it just logically for just a moment about the left side with Dallo there. And I think about Rashford's speed and Dallo's speed and tenacity that he has too. And I think if we actually utilize them together to interchange and combine and to really follow up on a press, they would be really scary for an opposition.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that did happen in the first half briefly, where we were a little bit ahead of the game against Villa, I noted this, and this hasn't happened in like the last 6 games, is when Dallo followed up Rashford and overlapped, Leon Bailey's sprinting backwards. Well, that's where you want Leon Bailey, sprinting backwards into his own third, not running at you into your final third, right? And it's like it's finding the balance. You have to attack well to defend well. If you're going to be a top team, right? If you're going to be a good team, you have to attack well to also defend well. You have to be organized in it, and you have to use your attack to pin them. That's what all the good teams do, right? City pins them, right? And Arsenal will pin teams, and Liverpool will pin teams where, sure, you lose the ball, you don't score on every attack, but they don't have 3 guys running at your 2 every time because they've had to track back to play defense. And I think we've played into teams' hands a lot where we're not forcing them to defend us because at times we attack with so few and we don't follow it up. We're letting them off. We're saying, yeah, you only have to have 3 or 4 players back to defend against us. And then we're just going to hope we win those battles every time to get a goal. And you can keep your attackers up the pitch. And we've played into the hands a lot. And so solutions wise, I would take it and say to some degree, like, if you took Ericsson out of that Villa game and put Ugarte in there, and then you played it almost the exact same, but you pushed it way up, would it not work? Would it not have been better? Would we not be able to build on that at least? I'm not saying it'd be a great right away.
No, of
Could we
course.
not build on that?
But this is, I think this is the biggest issue for me, and I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. We'll get games that were used to happening or that are porous, or we'll get like a Porto and we'll go, mate, we've seen this before. We've seen the gaps. We know that you can set the team up to quell those gaps. You just aren't doing it.
Yeah.
Or we'll get a Liverpool or a Tottenham game where you go, that's not how you should set up the press. There's too many gaps in midfield. You're not backing it up fully. The players are being dragged out wide. You can do a full backed up press against Chelsea last season, against Villa. Again, you're just not doing it. And it just, again, it boils down to the evidence is in front of his face. Even when the good results come, he doesn't persist with that. He just changes the game model again.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I'm not sure that I think the best thing we can hope for is in this international break, he goes away and he assesses things and he switches it up. He switches things up and he recognizes the incredible problems that we've had without the ball. And these are problems that we've had without the ball for 2 seasons now. It's not sustainable at all. He keeps rotating players now, and he keeps the team fresh. I think that's good, personally. But the only reason he had to do that in the first place was because last season you're playing games at a very high octane pace. Okay, like everybody has injuries, right? The Premier League is the most physical league in the world. It's very tenacious. They let fouls go a lot more than other leagues. The pace is very high, and it can happen to everybody. But wouldn't it make sense that the reason you're having more injuries is because you're playing these helter-skelter chaos ball games? Or at least, number one, it's not really a sustainable way to play football, and also you're knackering the players out when you should be keeping them fresh.
Yep. Agreed. So moving ahead. So let's just briefly, I want to touch on.
Let's sprinkle some positivity, hopefully.
Yeah, I want to touch on the situation as it kind of stands, at the moment with Ten Hag following this kind of meeting, right? As I said before, I would so going into this whole break, this executive meeting, all of that, there are serious concerns. United are in 14th. We have a negative expected goal differential. So we're conceding more chances than we are creating, which is bad. The top 10 teams don't do that. We're 11th there. Okay. So bad at our chance creation isn't great. We're too open. We concede too many chances, concede too many goals. And that's even with Aston Villa being a very tight game. We're still pretty bad in that department, 14th or 15th overall. Our league position is probably what it is. And frankly, we deserve to be in that position. Last year, we would have deserved to be in this position too, but we actually overperformed our performances with a lot of late goals and things like that. McTominay saving the day. We were bad. We don't have that happening anymore. We don't have those late goals against Chelsea, Brentford, a few others, at least 9 or 12 points or something that's got McTominay won with late goals. We don't have that. But that was masking even how bad last year was, despite everybody recognizing it. So, what's happened now is that you have the leadership team there and the football side of it that want to give him a bit more time. That was their view. Okay. That was the main view that was in place. And so from the Ineos perspective, from Sir Jim, all of that as an owner, he does not feel that this is going well. He has serious concerns about it and that this can't continue. He doesn't want to step in and do it. He wants there to be their decision, but he also wants to make his feelings very clear. Now, they've had discussion among them during Villa, before, after, and in today's executive meeting. And my best kind of gathering of it, because I haven't really got anything from like after the meeting, if something has changed, following the discussions of everybody, is that what will have happened is Sir Jim will have let them know you could make a change. Like, I'm on board if you want to change the manager. He's definitely not sitting there like, I'm going to say no if you recommend to me that we change the manager. He's made that clear, and he'd be open to them making a change. At the same time, it's up to them. And so I think somewhat what people are expecting during this meeting is them to get together and decide this is exactly what we're doing. And that might be the case, but it's going to be up to Ashworth, Barada, and them to do that. And really mostly Dan Ashworth there. So what they're going to look at is from here, this would be my best sort of assessment of things, is they might take a day or two and say, should we just make a change now? Should we just and then they'll let Sir Jim know and say, hey, we're decided we're going to make a change. I don't think that's going to happen. I would put that on the lower end of things, that's going to happen right now. Because they didn't go into this meeting with that in mind. And I don't think Sir Jim was going to beat them up about it. Right. But he has kind of warned them as the boss, as the owner, as the person looking at this and saying something's got to improve. And if changing the manager will do it, do it. And that kind of tells you better turn things around, or you're going to have to do that. You know what that means when a boss says something like that to you. That's my impression of it. And they're going to have to then look at it and say, okay, do we just make a change now in the next day or two? They could decide to do that. Ashworth might get together with Wilcox and Barada and say, oh, yeah, I don't know if we're going to fix this. Let's just do it. The pressure is on us now, because we're responsible now. Because that's one of the things that is important to understand. If they let this continue and it continues to go bad, they're responsible. They're overseeing this now. These are football people. They're looking at the same games we are. They can't sit there and promise progress and process and that it's all getting better behind the scenes and then things don't get better. They're on the hook for this from us, and that also means from the bosses. So they could make that decision in the next couple of days, but I don't think they will. I think they will give it a little bit more time while considering what would happen if they do have to make a change, which very likely would be, at least for now, Ruud van Nistelrooy taking over as the interim, which we don't know if it's going to be any better. It's the type of thing you do when you say, well, we know this guy can't turn it around, so maybe this person will just have better ideas for now while we figure out the long-term solution. And maybe they'll just improve the vibes, and maybe they'll just improve the mood and the atmosphere, and and just go a little more back to basics, and we just take it from there. And maybe they'll be more open to input from us or something. That's why you do something like that. So they could do that, but they'll very likely give it a little bit more time, and they're going to want to see improvement in those games. And because it's gone so poorly, now you're out of like that leeway where you can say, oh, well, the performance was good for 45 minutes, but we didn't get any points, against like Palace. You can't really have those games anymore. You have to have wins in between them, and good wins, to turn things around, because you can't keep just dropping points endlessly while improving, So you've kind of run out of that breathing room, because you did have breathing room to drop points this season based on their goals, where if you're playing good football but dropping points, okay. Because then eventually you will start winning points if you're playing good football consistently. Problem is we've played bad football and dropped points, so now you're going to have to play football and win games, right? There's favorable games too when you look at United's matchups. When you look at it, there is a chance. I mean, Brentford, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't say it's a
but then again,
favorable game.
I mean, Brentford are brilliant. Yeah, they'll probably score
they've been
against us in the first minute.
And Thomas Frank has quite honestly tactically destroyed us
Ten Hag
every
many
game
times,
so far, that he's played against him. But it is winnable. Then you have Jose Mourinho away, which is tricky.
Oh.
And you look at it and say, okay, so if they decide to stick, those are two really difficult games actually to get through. because, man, and you need points now in the Europa League because we have 2. After 2 matches, we're sitting like 26th, 27th position in the Europa League. So it's not just there. We're 21st, okay? So we're 1 point clear of elimination, and we're in the knockouts zone where at the end of 8 games, you've got to play a knockout. That's not good because I would not bet on us winning a game. We're not at that stage where we could say, oh, we draw Olympiacos, we're winning. I don't know that we're going to win if we draw Olympiacos or Athletic Club or Hoffenheim or, Galatasaray again or Rangers. Who knows? I cannot bet that we would win those games. Or Porto, who also have 1 point. But, so those are a little bit of tricky ones to get through. But after that, there is a point where you could build momentum. And they are, and at the same time, to the games, you're not going to get excuses for not winning against West Ham, who have been pretty poor, against Leicester City in the League Cup. You have Chelsea, but then you have, I don't know how to pronounce it, PAOK, and then you have Leicester again, and then you have a break, and then you have Ipswich. So, there's winnable games here, a lot of them, and games that you should be the better team. In every one of these games, you should, barring maybe Chelsea, you should be the better team, and you should look like the better team. So I think what will happen is they'll have I think it's more likely they have a conversation with Ten Hag in the next few days and say, okay, we need to turn this around. We need good performances and we need results because we need to see this improving. Because that's, again, somewhat crazily another break. And it's only 6-7 games to that break. And then, and it's only 4 league games to another break, right? And he's going to have to get results in that period of time, but also play well. And I think it would be helpful to put the pressure on and talk about things like Ugarte. And I know they want to be somewhat hands-off and all of that, but I think this is where maybe it would help having a little bit more outside perspective from people and to say, look, we signed Ugarte to do this. We need to see this way of playing because we think it'll work better. Can you work with us on this? Can you implement this model a bit better, a bit more in line with all of our ideas? And let's see if that can work. And I think that if he does, I think it would improve because we have good players. And the weirdest part about this year is there's a couple of players playing really poorly. Like I would say Bruno Fernandes, Lisandro Martinez. But besides them, I don't feel like everybody's been bad like last year. I don't feel that way. Like all these players are just, have been really poor. I think there's been a lot of good performances by a lot of players. Just in a very disjointed way of where the puzzle's not put together. And so I think it could turn around. That is a very maybe coping view of things, a very overly optimistic view of things, because I don't think it will. I don't think it will, but if it is to turn around.
If it doesn't, let me come in here. So if it doesn't, what is to happen? And is there a reason why he's getting more time? And if there is a reason why he's getting more time, what's the point in even having, they have to have a meeting because it's been bad. But why, on the basis of what we've seen, is he getting more time? Yeah. If already in the summer, he wasn't, like you said, he wasn't their guy, and it was messy, and we were very close to getting other managers. No, sorry, that was it.
Yeah. It went away for a second, so I missed the last part of that question. Could you repeat it? That's why I was silent.
No, don't worry. I'm having technical difficulties there. But if this meeting happens and he gets more time, why, on the basis of the 7 games that we've had, is he getting more time? And what's the point of even having the meeting of a telling off of you're not doing good enough and this isn't good enough, when we already have evidence in the summer of him not being their guy and it being unsure? and they didn't work out agreements with managers, and they were flirting, and they had other meetings. Why are we still at this point now where he's getting more time? Why, on the basis of, number one, he's not liked by not liked by Ineos. He wasn't wanted by Ineos in the first place, and we've
Yeah.
seen that from the summer. And then we get 7 more games of him having more investment, and we still getting bad results. Why is he then getting more time?
Well, I would give it 2 reasons. Number 1, and I'm not even saying I particularly agree with this, but number 1, one of the things that Ineos said is that they learned lessons from Nice and not being so involved. And in their first few seasons, they chopped and changed managers like constantly. They changed managers. They kept changing managers over and over. And so Dave Brailsford and I think that, unfortunately, I think this is potentially a little bit of a negative, is that you can overreact to things like that. And I think that they want to make a point of being less hands-on on the football decisions, because it has been a concern, right, from fans, how involved Joe Glazer, things like that, were in the day-to-day, in the football decisions and the hirings and the firings and all of that, and that we've never really had the recommendations made by it. So I think they're conscious of that. At the same time, the downside there is you're still responsible if it goes bad. If you let and that's why getting a new fresh start made more sense, because then you just get a clean slate. Now you don't have a clean slate. You already messed up the decision in the summer in how you did it. But I think they're wary of that, and that's why Sir Jim's not going to rush in and say sack him, sack him, sack him. He's going to say, I don't like how it's going, but I don't like how it's going, but
But carry on anyway.
Yeah, we're going to carry on anyway, but you have my approval, by the way. Like, it's like hint, hint, but you better get things right. And I think for the other guys, they've just been there for a short time. And I think that they're wary of it. I mean, I pointed this out before. Dan Ashworth's never really sacked a manager. When he came into Brighton, they had Chris Hughton, but he was on his way out. He's never really sacked a manager. He's appointed a lot, and then they've left for bigger pastures. He's set things up. But, he essentially helped put together the English team and Southgate and all of that. And he put together Potter, and he put together De Zerbi, and did these things, but he's never really had to replace anybody. And it's only been 7 games. And I think that they're wary of being overreactive there. I think you've seen enough. And I think that it is a bit of a mistake. But then you also have to factor in, what do you do about it? Part of the problem is when they screwed it up in summer, and I think they screwed it up because they either needed to be committed from the start or follow through on the replacement. There's no good situation out of this. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go ahead with it, because it's never a good time for bad news. And you can be tricked into waiting to pull the Band-Aid off and thinking if you wait, sometimes it's going to get better, but you just have to do it. But what's the ideal now? Because the managers they want aren't available. There's no guarantee you do better under Venice. I'm just giving the thinking. I'm not even saying I agree with this, but these are the things they're going to think about. The replacements, all of it. And do and I don't think they expected it to go this bad, this fast either, as part of the problem. And I think that they will be now a little more proactively looking for, like, well, is there we don't know if it's going to be great with Ruud. Is there someone else who could come in for the rest of the season that would make it not a waste? And now they're going to be proactively doing some discovery behind the scenes on that kind of stuff. Is there a permanent manager we could tempt away that we actually really like, that we could get now and for the long haul? And that's why I suspect it'll go into the next international break, because I think that they factually were unprepared for how bad this was going to be. I'm not giving them an out for that. I think that's a failure on their part to do so, but it stems back from summer, because once you did that, there's no good way out of this situation this year. There's huge downsides to everything that we see at this point in time.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to hear, but I guess that's kind of what's going to happen when the situation in the summer was messy in the first place, and it wasn't very concrete. If it wasn't, if he was always going to be their guy, I think they would have done it much earlier in the summer and said, no, look, we're going with Ten Hag. Do it after the cup final. Get together on the cup final. All raise your arms together. Be like, this is the guy. But I guess
he's our man. Exactly.
And it's not that simple. So I mean,
yep.
it sounds like onward we go with a manager who is underperforming woefully. I get that. Is cost a factor here?
I think like it, you have to be wary of calling it like it's a factor. Obviously, you have to weigh all of these things up, right? Like you have to add them all, like because it's never like one or the other. Sometimes when you say cost, I'm just being careful. The question's fine. Sometimes when you say cost is a factor, people will say, "Oh, they're broke. They don't have the money." No,
Yeah,
it's like that's not really it. It's more like, could they sack him? Yeah, they could pay it out. They totally could. Let's make that clear. But is it like when you weigh it up then to the replacement and to this and to that, and you say, is it worth the money? Is it not? Are we guaranteeing anything improved? And you start to compare to all the points. It's a factor. It's one of 10 factors,
yes,
that
yes,
has
yes.
its own
It's
weight,
like,
because sure, you don't want to pay out 16 million. You end the season the same as where you were if you didn't sack him. That that sucks. That's a possibility. We sacked Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. We brought Ralph Rangnick in. He did practically nothing for us in the end. It kind of turned into a joke by the end of the season, and we ended up spending like 20 million that year, and we went from 6th to 6th. That's a consideration,
yeah.
in all of this, that those things are occurring. But look, they could decide to make the change now, but it's going to be on Ashworth's head now to look at it after the discussion of going through it and say, and if he's changing his mind from his earlier thought process on it. But yeah, I mean, I would suspect we roll on for a bit more.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yep.
I think that's I think you've given the people an answer.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Well, yeah, I think we've about covered it, and I think we've discussed all the problems. The solutions are tough, and if he's staying, he's got to figure it out pretty quickly.
Absolutely, yeah. Hopefully we see something. I'm just
We want
asking
to see a
for
change,
something.
right?
Yes.
Because we know what we're doing hasn't been working, so let's not keep
I think
doing
he
that.
desperately needs. I think he desperately needs points on the board now, though.
Yeah, yeah, he does too.
It was like it's literally been 3 weeks since United have won a
Yep.
game. There's been a lot of football played in that time.
Yep. There has been. All right. Well, let's end it here, and I think that about covers it. And we'll do it again after we come back. We'll see if anybody's changed their mind in the next day or two on where we're heading and where they're going, and if they've reached different conclusions than we seem to be leaning towards. But if so, then we might do something next week. And like, what would a Rude team look like from what little evidence that we
Yeah,
have?
and where Ten Hag went wrong, sort of the evolution
Yeah,
of 3
yeah,
seasons.
exactly. Otherwise, we'll come back and see what happened in after Ten Hag returns and after we play a game, and if there is any changes and how we do. So yes, thank you again, and make sure to please follow Dharnish on Twitter. Always tag him, or on X. I always tag him in the post, and give him a follow there. Good threads and good breakdowns, and thank you all for listening and watching, and thank you again, Dharnish, for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. Always fun-ish.
Yes. Yeah, fun-ish. Hopefully it gets more fun. When it was more fun in game when we were talking about some wins, but we haven't had so many of those, have we?
No.
All right, then we'll call it there. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. We'll see you in the next one.